Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chummy, and I am really excited for today's guest. Dr. Franck Marchis is a senior planetary astronomer and chair of the Exoplanet group at the Carl Sagan Center of the SETI Institute. So we know he's already a lot smarter than I am. He's also chief scientific officer and founder at Unistellar. Over the past 2 decades, he's dedicated his work to the study of our solar system, specifically the search for asteroids with moons using very high-end telescopes. He's been involved lately with the generation of extremely large telescopes. Dr. Marchis has co-authored hundreds of scientific publications, trained numerous students, and been a consultant and an interviewee for a bunch of documentaries in multiple languages. I can barely speak one. He even has an asteroid named after him in honor of his discovery of the first triple asteroid system in 2007. So my first question, Dr. Marchis, you're a lot smarter than me. Is it okay for me to just call you Frank?
Yes, Eric. You can just call me Frank. It's easier like that.
So I'm glad we have you today, right? We scheduled this a while ago. Obviously, it'll air at a different date. But today, there's all this news about they're launching a missile into space to destroy an asteroid. I feel like this is in your department, and you can help me figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, NASA has this new mission called the DART. It's a mission that will be useful to finally know if we have the technology and validate this technology to divert an asteroid. So, of course, for the first attempt, we are not going to divert an asteroid. We're launching a mission that will impact the moon of an asteroid. So asteroids, some of them, 10% of them, in fact, in the near-Earth population, have tiny moons in orbit around them.
See, I had no idea. I didn't know asteroids had moons until I was doing the research to do the introduction. I don't think most people think that asteroids have moons because they think of asteroids as that's the object itself. Why would that have a moon around it? Like, how big do they have to be to have its own moon?
Not big. That's the magic of this of the story. In fact, the first one we discovered was in 1995 with the Galileo spacecraft. And since then, we have discovered more and more of those asteroids with moons. And they don't have to be huge because there is no gravity over there in space. So the tiny moon will feel only the gravity of the primary, the big one. So this we're talking about in this case of this mission is a 300, 400 meter diameter asteroid, Didymos, and this tiny moon in orbit around it, which is not even 100 meters in diameter.
Oh, so much. Okay, so the asteroid itself, 300 to 400 meters. That's relatively small in terms of space objects. 100 meters, that's a football field, right? That's a 100-meter dash. That's not that big. But it's interesting that the relative size of the moon to the asteroid, the moon is relatively very large, right? It's only that 1/4 less diameter than the moon. Compared to our moon of the Earth, much, much smaller than that.
Yeah, we have different population, different type of moons, in fact. Some of them are binary made of 2 components exactly the same size. We also have those. It's a crazy population of multiple asteroid systems in space. We see a lot of different ones.
But what you made a good point at the beginning. They don't really know if this is going to work. They're testing it out.
Yes. So to test it out, instead of trying on a big asteroid and taking some risk that you don't want to take, they are trying on a small moon. So the DART will impact the small moon. And the advantage of this is that the small will probably have this taking a nudge, and this nudge will slightly change its orbit. So from the ground, from Earth, we will be able to see the slight perturbation of the moon, and from that, we'll be able to know whether or not these deflection techniques, which is called kinetic impactor in this case, does work. And that's kind of important for us because we want to validate.
Kind of important. If it doesn't work, I guess we're all going to get hit by this asteroid, right?
No. This one is not gonna frighten our planet. This one is safe. It's a safe one.
What if they screw it up? What if they change the direction and they send it towards us and it was going to go away from us in the first place?
There is like millions, not millions, but hundreds of analyses done to make sure that this is not going to happen.
Are you involved in any of this analysis?
No, I'm not involved in this analysis. I trust my colleagues on that.
But you know a lot of the people who are doing this.
Yeah.
So what I couldn't figure out is how many jobs do you have, right? So you're a PhD astrophysicist. I mentioned, right, the SETI Institute, Carl Sagan Center, Unistellar. You've been a professor. You're writing publications, you're teaching students, you're doing documentaries. How many jobs do you have, or at least how many jobs do you think you have when you wake up in the morning?
I would say 4.
4.
Yeah.
What are the 4? What order is full-time to part-time there?
I'm an astronomer at the SETI Institute. I'm a chief scientific officer at Unistellar, a private company. SETI Institute is a non-profit scientific organization. I'm the outreach manager at the SETI Institute, meaning that I kind of participate to the outreach of the institutes. That's why I have shows on YouTube and participate to some show on TV as well. And then I'm doing my research. My core research, I do that on the side too, in the evening sometimes, so overnight. Like last night, that's why I look a bit tired. I was observing.
You look great. You look great to me, honestly. And I know one of your roles is the Unistellar role. Like you just mentioned, Unistellar. So founder there, co-founder there, one of the two, I forget. I'll say co-founder, so we're not bragging too much.
Yeah.
Is that the huge telescope that I'm seeing next to you?
Yes.
Behind you in the camera.
This is the Eviscope 2, the number 2 in our technology. It's we released it in October of this year, so it's a new one. It's the 11.2 centimeter diameter telescope. But the point here is that it's not a normal telescope. It's a digital smart telescope. It's a telescope that you can control with a phone. And if you don't know anything about astronomy, this telescope will guide you and explain to you what to do, how to observe. And then you can see in the eyepiece on the side here, a beautiful image of galaxies and nebulae. Yesterday night, I was testing this in my backyard here in San Francisco, and I was observing the Triangulum galaxy, a galaxy which is 3 million light years away from us with this tiny telescope.
Wow, that's impressive. That's amazing. And people can buy this, right? This is meant to be a retail product. Great Christmas gift, I assume, for somebody that's interested in the stars and the galaxies.
Yeah, it's the telescope you can buy on our website, unistellar.com, but I think on Amazon now you can have it too. I mean, there are plenty of places. We have distributors all around the world. The network is huge now. We started distributing the telescope in 2019, and now we have more than 5,000 Eviscope users around the world.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How did you get involved on the business side? Because everything, you have the natural textbook scientist career path, right? You go to school, you go to more school, you go to more school, you work in a school, right? There's so much around academics and papers and publishing and your research. How did you get involved in a tech startup?
There's 2 reasons. One, very practical, is I was tired of begging for money, because researchers are doing that a lot. We spend our time writing grant proposal, asking money to NASA and SF, and being most of the time rejected. 90% of the grants are rejected, and it's a lot of work to write a grant proposal.
And that must be very emotionally derailing, right? If 9 out of the 10 things you do are going to fail, that's a lot of rejection. You got to have real thick skin to keep asking for these grants, which I think most people forget, that the researchers, they're not just doing research, they're literally begging for money, and they're spending all of this time that ends up not being fruitful, kind of on the sales side, if you may.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a sale that you control. I mean, I've been working in private company for multiple years now, and at least if I don't sell telescopes, so if I don't achieve the goal of this telescope, it's my full responsibility. In this case, with NASA and SF, you basically send a 15 pages document to some people, and they barely read them, and they tell you after a few months that you don't get the money. And most of the time, the justification is completely not really related to the reality. So I decided to kind of start something new, and a lot of scientists have been working on that, is to kind of go to the private industry to get funding, so we get funding, but also be able to do our research.
Right. That makes sense, because I was a student at MIT, a lot of brilliant minds there, a lot of brilliant professors. And the way I understood it was effectively they were getting paid by the school to work 4 days a week. And that 5th day was, okay, you can go make money in the private sector on the 5th day. So you saw a lot of them being the chief technical officer or a co-founder. They were involved in a lot of companies. And a lot of the ones that were successful, they I mean, they made a killing and they made a fortune, and they were living in massive houses. And they were like, no, this is not from being an MIT professor. This is from my private sector work.
Yeah, and I mean, money is great, but it's not only that.
Right.
Also, with the private industry, you can quickly change the world, or at least put your ideas publicly. I mean, this telescope, the network of telescope, it's something that I dreamt about for quite a long time.
Well, what do you mean by network of telescope? That's interesting you said that.
Yeah, because this is not only a telescope. It's in fact, you control it with an app, and the telescopes are kind of, the users of the telescope can work together. So
this is not, so if I buy one, this is not just me at home using the telescope by myself, because that's how I always thought of telescopes, right? It's an individual solo endeavor. You're telling me this app is hooking them all. We're all on some big network together. Are we sharing images? Are we sharing data? Are people able to control my telescope remotely? What's going on here?
There's a lot. So right now, we're still in kind of the plan A of the app. You can control your telescope and you can share images with people. But on the top of that, you can also access to a Slack channel where you have conversation with other users. This will be later on integrated into our app. We are still testing this, kind of judging what people want to do. So in our Slack channel, people have conversation about scientific research. They can coordinate observations. So because with this telescope, you don't only look at galaxy nebulae in your backyard, which is amazing. You can also do research for the SETI Institute, help the SETI Institute to collect interesting data. So ton of research possible, but one of them, the most recent one that happened last week, 40 of our citizen astronomers, that's the way we call them.
Citizen astronomers, I like that.
Yeah, they basically observe a star continuously for 48 hours.
The same star, like they're all looking at the same star.
Exactly.
From different locations.
You use the rotation of Earth, so each of them could observe the star for 3 hours. So from we started in the US, then went to Japan and Europe and again. And now we have a full coverage of this brightness of the star for 48 hours. And we saw a small attenuation in the brightness of the star due to the presence of a planet, an exoplanet, which is passing between us and the star. So
an exoplanet. So you said, did I get there? An exoplanet?
Yeah, exoplanet.
What is an exoplanet? Is that
a planet in orbit around another star?
Okay, so in another solar system.
In another planetary system. Yes, which this one is 150 light years away from us, just so you know.
Oh, so what we're looking at is something that happened 150 years ago.
Yes, exactly. So we validated the existence of this planet. It's been detected a long time ago by the Kepler mission, but the orbit was poorly known. So we just got some first hint. This is very new. I basically got the picture like the diagram this morning. So it's very new. We have hint of the presence of this planet. So now we kind of refine the orbit. And that's what we're trying to do here. Refine the orbit of the planet to see there is some small change due to the presence of another planet, for instance. So this is the kind of thing that people in the backyard can do with this telescope.
That's impressive. So I see your point that you can do this in the private sector, but you can't do this in academia.
No. I would have to write grants and multiple grants to get funding. And I mean, this is something that, first of all, people buy the telescope, okay? Most of them. So they have an incentive of using it. It's not if I was shipping some telescopes to universities and tell them, oh, use it. So when
I think you're right. If it's free, nobody cares when it's free. There's no investment. There's no pain involved in, hey, I have some sweat equity or real equity in this. But I think you're right. If they pay for it, yeah, it's funny. You think about it, they actually are paying you and they're doing better work than if you gave it to them for free. So it's a win-win from your point of view.
It's a win-win, I will say.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they're excited about the fact that they're using this telescope to do more than what a classical telescope will be able to do. Friday, we're organizing a campaign that is potentially 1,500 people who could observe the solar orbiter. This is an ESA space mission, the European Space Agency mission, that's flying by Earth. It's going to go super close to Earth, 400 kilometers from our surface. And our users will be able to see it passing by in the sky using this telescope.
That's impressive. So for you, it sounds like you're most excited about this network of astronomers that you're building out more so than, let's say, the technology in the telescope itself,
Yeah.
the hardware.
But the technology is important. I mean, that's true that this is possible only now. This kind of telescope can be created and built and designed only in 2010, 2020. We had to wait for the development of other technology to be able to do this. Computers, sensors, and also manufacturing the device itself to manufacture at large scale like this is not an easy task. I mean, it's not something you can do with people manually. You have to build a telescope that can be mass produced, and I think we succeeded in doing that.
And how much is this? It's like $3,000. Am I right? Somewhere in that range?
There is one model, the Equinox at $3,000, and there is this one, the new one at 4,000.
Okay. So not that expensive. I mean, expensive, but not that expensive. Okay, if you want to splurge on a nice Christmas gift, lots of people could afford this. I mean, there's bicycles that cost more money than this that people
Yeah,
are buying.
exactly. And it's not something you buy every month. It's something you buy and you can use it for years and years. And we also, with the network, we're giving life to this telescope, which is more interesting than the simple telescope. The network basically already our users, our citizen astronomers, are creating some new campaign by themselves.
What
They're
do you
already
mean by a
doing
new
things that
campaign? How do they create their own campaign?
some of them have ideas. Like one of them wanted to observe a supernovae. So basically, he sent a message to on the Slack channel to the user, say, hey, there is this supernovae, we like to observe it. And multiple of them observe it over like a week and a half. And now they have a very nice picture of the supernovae by combining the observation together. So they're taking ownership of the network. We provide the tools, and now the creativity of human being is always better than one person, right? And we are getting that at the moment.
Are your prospects for research, your own personal research, has it improved because of this mass scale of data that you're able to get through a global set of citizen astronomers? Are you able to change are you able to change the results of your research papers, do better research because of this?
Yeah. We another way we can some other things we can do with this telescope is to derive the shape and size of asteroids. And that's something I've been doing using 8 10-meter class telescopes. So now we combine those observations with the 8 10-meter class telescope with those observations coming from the small telescopes to get a better shape. So we'll be working on that for some of the largest asteroids in the main belt, for instance.
And is that so? You're saying you'd rather have a network of smaller telescopes than one big telescope in one location? Like, are you able to get better data by having multiple angles on this, or would you rather have just the biggest telescope in the world from your shed? You can get all the data from there.
I will not say that we prefer to have one.
Or does it depend on the project?
It depends on the project. Each project is slightly different. One of the reasons I like the small telescope idea, the network, it's also because people participate to science. And that's one of the main goals in my career, is not to only do my research and write papers that only 400 people in the world will read.
You're lucky if 400 people read it.
Yeah, exactly. Is to have people involved in the scientific process, in the scientific world. I really want to break this wall that we have between the scientists and the rest of society. And I think it's a wall that both scientists and the society has created, and this should not exist, because science is a way of thinking more than a field reserved to an elite.
So you want to be the next Carl Sagan or the next Bill Nye the Science Guy. Like, you want to be the bringing mass popular appeal to what may otherwise be very dry scientific subjects.
Yeah. I don't know if I will be one of those people you mentioned, but I think it's important that we bring science to people so they learn how we do it and they recognize the importance and interest of science. It's multiple reasons for that, and also the creativity. I think scientists are great people, but they don't have such a great imagination that a large population will have. So as soon we bring science to people, I'm sure we're going to make a lot of progress. in terms of development and scientific progress as well.
Who are the types of people that are in the network? The citizen astronomers, do they typically, I assume they mostly don't have PhDs, they're mostly not academics, they're mostly not scientists, but they have some interest in science. They probably read a lot of books or they had telescopes when they were younger. They're not, I assume they're not just completely out of the blue now starting to get into this. There's some background that they have.
So we did a Kickstarter in 2017. That's the way we get the first funding.
2017.
Funding.
So this is all pretty new then. Like this all happened in the last 4 years.
Yeah. My life has changed radically over the past 4 years.
You probably didn't see it getting this big, is my guess.
Sorry?
You probably didn't expect it would get this big in 4 years.
Frankly, I did not. This is like the wildest imagination will not have imagined that we have 5,000 telescopes around the world. That's something like I did not imagine that. But so I wanted to say I forgot what I wanted to say. What were we talking
4 years ago, Kickstarter.
Yeah. So 4 years ago, Kickstarter. So we raised money with that. And we study a bit who were the people who bought these telescopes. And it's interestingly, a significant fraction of them, I forgot the exact number, between a third and a quarter, I never had a telescope before.
Oh, this is their first ever telescope. That's surprising. Surprisingly high.
And it's because most people are very interested in astronomy. Okay. Everybody has an interest most of the time in astronomy. You sit in an airplane and you say, I'm a SETI Institute astronomer. In 5 seconds, you have everybody in the row will tell you about alien life, black hole, etc. So people.
Oh, we'll get to the aliens later in the episode. Yeah.
People know about the field of research, but their observation has always been very difficult. It's been like kind of complex. So it looks very difficult to manipulate a telescope and so on. So we are bringing this new technology, and the iPhone of astronomy, if you want to call it, that allows everybody to basically do astronomy. And people realized that. And they trusted us, which is surprising, but they did trust it. They trusted us right at the beginning of the Kickstarter. So now the network has grown, and we have, I will say, people who have never had telescope before doing scientific investigation and even becoming kind of a spokesperson of a science field. We have some of them who are very active in planetary defense, for instance. One of them is Rachel Knight. I work with her, and we met recently. She's been doing a lot of observation of asteroids with the EV scope.
So where around the globe are these 5,000? Are they everywhere? Are there some continents, some countries, some regions that you wish you had more located because it would give you better data?
Yes. So we started essentially in North America and Europe. Then we expanded in Japan. We have a huge community of citizen astronomers in Japan. Then we went to Australia and New Zealand, which is kind of growing. And now we're starting diversifying. Like we announced in October that our telescope will be available in the Middle East, in South America, in Chile and Peru. We have the first telescope shipped to Kenya 2 weeks ago.
That's impressive.
Coming in Africa.
That's impressive. Yeah, and obviously, you want to be near the equator. You want to be in the southern hemisphere because obviously you're going to get a very different view of the galaxies when you're in different parts of the planet.
We have one arriving. Oh, we're also in India recently too. So we kind of filling up the gap. So if you look on our map, we have a map of users. You will see that there is concentration in Europe and United States and so on. But we're starting having like tiny dots popping up around the world.
So you mentioned asteroids as a big topic, but you mentioned earlier aliens, right? I assume people are getting these telescopes because they want to look for aliens, right? They want to look for UFOs too.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that's not happening.
No, I will not tell you it's not happening. I know people who bought the telescope because they want to be able to see by themselves aliens or what there is in the sky, which I think is admirable.
Here's an honest question. Do you believe aliens are real or no?
That the question is difficult to answer because I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that.
Are there other life forms outside of Earth?
Yeah.
So you think there are?
Yes.
You know there are? You've seen them, or you believe there are?
No, I believe that knowing the statistics of the number of planets in our galaxy, I can give you a short. Our galaxy, let's just say our galaxy.
Right, just the Milky Way.
200 billion stars in our galaxy, right? we know that each stars in average have 2 planets. Okay. And we know that 30% of those planets are terrestrial and located in the habitable zone of the star, meaning they could have liquid water. So there is at least 300 million planets potentially habitable in our galaxy.
Right. So you just need one of them. You just need one of them to have some life form there.
Exactly. So the
Right.
the likelihood of not having one of them having life, it's very small. Especially because if you look at our own planet, life appeared very quickly. Our planet was formed 4.5 billion years ago, and life appeared 500 million years after the formation.
So you say that's quick.
That's quick.
Yeah.
And it was not even live, it was not a hospitable planet. It was a crazy world with lightning, volcanoes, bombardment of asteroids. And despite that, we had these microbes thriving on the surface of our planet.
So then what about UFOs? Because I mean, you see all these videos that show up. That's like right here on Earth. I have a friend who works in the defense industry, does a lot of missile research, and he says these things are typically defense tests, different kinds of aircraft missiles that are being tested by US government, Russian government, Chinese government, and they do it on purpose because they want the other side to know what capabilities they have. Is that what you think is going on here, or you think something else is going on? Because you got the telescopes, you can see this stuff. I just have these glasses which aren't as good as what you've got.
So I will say that your friend is probably right. But we need to show that to the public, and we need to explain that to the public. And that's why I'm coming back to my story of science, bringing science to people. We need to give the power to people to reach their own explanation and to do their own test. So these telescopes and other technology will allow that. I'm hoping that people will start observing more and more things moving in the sky using these telescopes and other, and they will do their own analysis, they will do their own papers and so on, and they will explain what they are. Probably, as your friend mentioned, some test of unknown objects from military, or maybe simply a confusion of with some meteorological phenomena. We will see.
How big do you want the astronomy network to get? If you're at 5,000 now, I assume 5,000 is bigger than you ever thought, but now that you got there in less than 4 years, what do you think is the next reasonable benchmark to get to?
So it's two things. I want us to reach 100,000 pretty soon.
That's a lot big. I thought you were going to say 10,000. 100,000 is a lot.
Like in the next 5 years. But I want us to also be everywhere in the world.
Right.
That's a very important part.
And but then, just 100,000 in America, that's not the same thing as a global network.
And then what I want is us to also have people using the telescopes. At least once a month, people who have their telescope will use them to observe the dark sky. That's one of the fundamentals of our company. We don't only want to sell telescopes, we also want people to use them. I don't want them to be like in the basement taking dust. I want them to be used regularly, loaned to people, be used in parties. You go to Thanksgiving dinner, you bring your telescope, so this way the family can see stars and nebulae. This is what the world I want to live. Instead of watching Netflix and other streaming platform, people should also spend some time looking at the dark sky. It's inspiring.
The thing is, though, if you gave me that, I could look in the sky at night, but everything would look the same. Like, oh, that's a star, that's a star, that's a star. Like, I wouldn't know what to do.
But the app will tell you. We have an app that basically tells you, do you want to observe a galaxy? Here the galaxy you can observe from your location. A nebulae, here the nebulae.
And do you hit a button on the app and then the telescope will start to move automatically? It knows the coordinates and it goes?
Exactly. And then while it's moving, you can even read a small text. So if you have your family around, you can pretend to be an astronomer by reading the text and telling them how far is the object, why this object is interesting, etc.
So how much have you... Oh, go ahead. You finish.
No, there is some kind of also educational part in the story here.
So I was going to say, how much have you learned about business now, having done this over many years? Because this sounds to me very expensive. This technology sounds like you need a lot of capital. You had the Kickstarter campaign. If it wasn't for Kickstarter, I don't know if it's an angel investor, it's private equity, it's venture capital, or it's you just empty your bank account and hope that it works. Like there had to be some risk taken by people because you can't build these things for free. There's a lot of technology on the software side, a lot of intellectual capital. There's, big risk here. And how much have you learned about business? Clearly not being a guy who went to business school.
Well, I'm still learning about business. Every week we have new ideas, and there is new things happening, and I have to learn. So yeah, I didn't know much about business beforehand. I had some help. I will say that's one of the reasons I live in San Francisco and in the US. I mean, here I can just go to see almost my neighbors and get some explanation of what is an investor. I had no idea what was an investor when I started this project. So I learned with people.
It's like your grant story, right? 90% of people will say no, and you're begging for money. It's sort of like the same thing with investors, right?
Yes. Yeah, we took some risk. I would just say, there is each of us. We are four co-founders. And if each of us took some major risks on a personal level, we had jobs, we quit our jobs, we have a career, we quit, but the patient, we believe in our project. And when
you all quit your jobs to do this?
Not all. I'm one of the few that did not, but the other one did. Yeah, they were researchers, and they basically dedicated they stopped their permanent job in France and they decided to be fully involved into Unistellar. My career changed. I'm still an astronomer, but I'm not the same astronomer that I was 5 years ago.
What do you mean by that?
Well, 5 years ago, I was the astronomer writing grant proposal, asking for telescope time on 5-10-meter class telescopes, and I was basing all my research in the future and present to technology coming from NASA and NSF, being part of committees and all of this. Now I'm an astronomer who have access to one of the largest network of telescopes in the world. They're small telescope, but we also agile. We have this facility that NASA or ESA don't have. For instance, this solar orbiter thing, we're doing it because we're the only one who can quickly generate an ephemeris, do the calculation, get the network ready. So.
And you say you have access to this network, but what I hear is no, you built the network, you created the network. Now you have access to it. You made this network.
Yeah, we made the network, and we now have access to it. And we created this new astronomy, and that's really something I want to say is that this new astronomy. What we meant by that is an astronomy accessible to people, an astronomy which is motivating and fun. We want people to enjoy the dark sky. We want the dark sky to be part of humanity, as it used to be in the past. When you were walking in the dark, you could see the Milky Way, talk to your kids about the stars, and all of this. You cannot do that anymore because of light pollution. So let's bring this back. Let's bring this astronomy back to the people.
So when you think about the network growing, will you want to develop different telescopes? Will you want there to be bigger telescopes, more powerful telescopes, different kinds of telescopes, because you can get all those different types of visuals across the globe? Does that help your research, or is it better that everyone has a uniform, same telescope across the network?
That's a very interesting question. One of the key of the system right now is the fact that all telescopes are identical. So it's true that our data processing and the extraction of information, it's easier because of that. But of course, in the future, we have new models. We just released the EVScope 2. It has a slightly different detector, for instance. So we are not going to diversify our gamut of product to 1,000 of different models. That's not the way we want to do it. We're probably going to improve slowly in the future. We have plans. I'm not going to reveal any, but we have ideas about how we can basically make this telescope even easier to use, more accessible. I will also mention that we also have ideas of products which are not related to telescopes. And one of them was released in June. It's an app. It's called Nocturne. It's an app that uses some of the technology we have on board the telescope. So thanks to Nocturne that work on the iOS only, you can take picture of the dark sky. So if you take a picture, you will see in the front plan, the trees or the people, and in the background, you will see the stars. It's a long exposure using an iPhone, basically.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, there's so much technology going on these days. So so I think about you talk about the dark sky, right? Right now it's daylight outside. Are you just up all night all the time? Like how much do you sleep? Are you up daytime and nighttime? How do you get your job? Because all of this has to happen at night, but then
I don't sleep enough,
day.
I will say. I don't sleep enough. That's true. I sleep like 6-7 hours per night. But I have this micro nap. I discovered this 4 years ago, in fact. But I can sit on a chair, close my eyes, and have a 15-minute nap. That's basically gonna help me to to go through the day.
15-minute nap. That's funny. And when I looked at your bio, I think it was on Twitter or somewhere, it said that you're a CrossFit athlete. And I'm thinking, how much time do you have to have 4 jobs? I guess that's why you're not sleeping. And you're clearly in shape because you can just look at you, right? There's no fat on you. So like you're doing CrossFit and you're an astronomer and you got an astronomy network other. How do you do all of this?
The CrossFit thing is something, every human being needs to have 1 hour for itself. And this is my hour. It's the hour where basically I know I will not get a phone call. I will not answer to any email, and nobody will join me. And it's kind of a religion for me. I know that every day I'm going there. And I arrive over there, I drop my brain and all my ideas, and I do this crazy exercise. And I loved it. It's kind of make me happy after. But yeah, it's a commitment, but it's a commitment that I'm taking seriously, because I know that if I don't do that, I will not be capable of doing everything else.
Yeah, that's impressive. And then finally, because we're coming into the holidays, we're going to start seeing all the stories about the Santa tracker and all the stuff from the North Pole. My guess is you've never seen Santa on one of your telescopes.
No, we have not seen Santa. We have seen some weird stuff, but not yet Santa. So maybe maybe one of these tiny dots that we saw moving in the telescope was Santa on the way to Earth for Christmas.
Because they've got, what is it, the NORAD tracker, and it's like, here's where Santa's. I mean, you talk about those numbers. How is he supposed to get to all these houses in a 24-hour period, right? It's physically impossible. He must have multiple Santas.
You just distort the space-time. It's easy, Eric. Just distort the space-time. This way, you slow down the time that allows you to go from houses to houses very quickly. There is always a scientific explanation if you have the good imagination.
I didn't think about slowing down the time element. I was thinking too much in 3D. I was thinking too terrestrially and not with that fourth dimension there.
See, if you had a telescope, you would be thinking in four dimension.
I think even with the telescope, see, what I don't have is the PhD in astrophysics that you have. So I think you could be good on any telescope, and you could give me the Hubble, and I would have no idea what I was doing because I only got as far as bachelor's degree. So you're a few years ahead of me on that.
You will be fine. We will help each other, and I'm sure you get some great ideas. You will take the Hubble and point it towards Santa Claus to see where it's.
Yeah, that's what you should do for the app for the holidays. It's like, okay, here's where Santa is, and then the telescope can track around. Frank, this has been fascinating, super interesting. I had no idea all that was going on here. Obviously, I knew about Unistellar. I knew about the telescopes. I didn't realize this network that was going on. That really adds a huge dimension to the story. You're just such an engaging guest. I can't wait to see what happens the next 4 years. Frank, I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. And that was our guest, Dr. Franck Marchis. As you heard, astronomer, wonderful, the just most interesting guest we've had on. This has been fascinating. Thanks for watching and listening to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chemi. We'll see you next time.